Hey everyone, Amanda from Lil Helper here, and today I'm going to teach you how to make these cool DIY crochet ear savers for frontline workers. These little guys can be put behind the head and used to help hold elastics on masks for people who are having to wear face masks for long periods of the day right now. If you're looking for a written pattern to go along with this, check out the Lil Helper blog. The link will be in the description below. So in order to make these, you're needing a few things. The first is some cotton yarn. I'm using Bernat Handicrafter 100% cotton yarn. The brand doesn't matter so much, but the material in this case does. We need something that's going to be okay with being washed and dried over and over again. The other thing is that we don't want a lot of stretch to this. If the yarn stretches too much, then they won't fit right and they won't do their job. So you want to make sure that you're not using an acrylic, because an acrylic will have a lot of stretch to it and it will lose its shape and it won't end up working the way that it should. You're also going to need some scissors. You'll need a crochet hook. I'm using a 5mm crochet hook, but the size doesn't really matter for this pattern. If you're using a bigger or a smaller crochet hook, I will show you how to adjust the pattern for that later on. You're also going to need a measuring tape just to make sure that your ear saver ends up the size that you want it. You're going to need some buttons. Also going to need a yarn needle. So a yarn needle, they come in a couple different materials, but a couple of key features that you're looking for, it's going to be that they're blunted on the end, so they're not pointy like a regular sewing needle, and they've got a larger eye on the end so that it's easy to thread yarn into them. So in order to get these started, we need to make a slip knot to put onto our crochet hook. So we're going to make a loop with our yarn. Right? And then you're going to reach through, grab the yarn, take your crochet hook, and insert it into the slip knot. And we are going to give it a little pull just to tighten it. So now you've got a tail, which is the end of your yarn that's cut, and you've got your working yarn, which is the yarn that's still attached to your yarn. So in order to start, we are going to make a foundation chain. Right? So our ear savers are going to end up being, the ideal length for them is about 5.5 to 6 inches long. So our foundation chain needs to be about that same length. So we're using a 5mm hook. I'm going to chain 20. However, if you're using a larger hook, you will need to chain fewer than that. If you're using a smaller hook, you may need to chain more. But basically, you're just going to keep chaining until you get to that 5.5 to 6 inch length, right? And in order to make a chain, we're just going to yarn over and pull the yarn through the loop that's already on our crochet hook. So here we are. I'll just do a few here to show you what this looks like. So that's 10 chains I've made. I'll chain 10 more and meet you at the end. So I've completed my 20 chains, and as you can see, my chain has ended up about 6 inches long, which is exactly where we want it to be. So now we are going to work on making the actual strap for our ear savers. So these ear savers are made with a half double crochet stitch, and a half double crochet is worked into, our first one is worked into the third chain from our hook right there. So that's chain number 1, chain number 2, and chain number 3 right there is where we're going to put our first half double crochet stitch. So half double crochet, you yarn over your hook from back to front, and insert your hook into your chain, grab your yarn and pull up one loop, and grab your yarn again and pull through all 3 loops on the hook, and that is a half double crochet stitch. And we're going to go along our chain and half double crochet in every chain along our foundation that we've made. And you're just going to continue to do that all the way along your chain until you get to the second to last chain. So you've made your half double crochets all the way across your chain. You've got your nice little swatch of half double crochets here. And we have one last chain remaining that we haven't worked into yet. So we're going to continue with half double crochets, but we're actually going to work more than one into this last stitch. So we're going to put 4 half double crochets in this last stitch, and we're going to make the sort of round part that makes up the end of our ear savers by putting multiple stitches in this last chain. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 half double crochets all in that last chain. So normally when you're crocheting, when you come to the end of your foundation chain, you would turn your work and then you would work back into the top of all of those stitches that you've just made. But for this, we're actually not going to do that. Instead of turning our work, we're going to rotate it, and we are actually going to work into the bottom of the stitches that we've just made. So these little bumpies that you see here each represent one stitch. So we're going to work a half double crochet into each one of those all the way along the bottom of this chain. So we're going to insert our hook in, and we are just going to continue with our half double crochets until we get back to the other end of our strap. So just like on the other side, what we've basically done is worked our way all the way down the bottom side of the chain, basically until the second to last chain. So this last chain is actually the very first spot where we worked our first half double crochet of the other side of the ear saver. So these 2 loopies on the side here are the first couple of loops of our foundation chain that were pulled up when we made this first half double crochet. This guy right here is our very first half double crochet that we made. So what we want to do is make it symmetrical to the other end, which means that we need to work more half double crochets into that last loop to make it match the other side. So we've already got 1, which means we need to make 3 more half double crochets into this same loop that we've already got 1 in order to have 4, just like on the other end. So now we want to connect this all together to make it nice and round like the other side. So we want to work a slip stitch into the top of the first half double crochet that we've made. Ignore these loopies because, like we said, they're not actually a stitch, they're part of the foundation chain. So we want to work into the top of the first actual stitch that we've made, not the chain. So we're going to work a slip stitch into the first of our first real half double crochet that we made. So a slip stitch is worked, it's very simple. You put your crochet hook into the top of your half double crochet, your first half double crochet. You're going to grab your yarn and bring it through. You don't yarn over before you do this, you just bring the yarn through, and then you're going to just bring it right on through the loop that's on your crochet hook as well. So no yarning over, just insert and pull through both loops. And now we just need to fasten this off. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put the yarn over our hook. We're going to make a loop and pull it through. We're going to pull some yarn, a decent amount, for a tail here. Give that a snip. We'll pull our working yarn out. So we are all done with that. And then we just have to grab our loose tail here and give it a little pull to make it nice and tight. And now we've made our strap for our ear saver. So next we just need to attach some buttons. So what I've done is I've cut myself a piece of yarn. It's a decently long piece of yarn. It's actually longer than the ear saver, but I find that when it comes to finishing, longer is actually better than too short. So I'm going to take this piece of yarn and I'm going to leave a decently long tail on it, and I'm going to tie myself a knot. And all this knot is going to do is going to stop this piece of yarn from pulling all the way through the ear saver super easily when I'm putting my buttons on. If you give this a really good tug, it will pull through the stitches, but it's just enough resistance to stop it from coming all the way through the strap of the ear saver while you're trying to put your buttons on. I'm just going to thread my yarn into the eye of my yarn needle. And I'm going to take my button and place it kind of where I want it on the end of my ear saver. And as you can see, I've got a pretty large button for this project. Your button doesn't necessarily have to be this big, but the bigger the button, the better for this project, because the buttons are going to be what the elastic of the mask hooks to, and they're going to be what's holding onto the pressure. So you want about a nickel-sized button or larger. So we're going to take our yarn needle. I'm just going to insert it from the back of the ear saver and pull it up through the ear saver and the hole in our button. So there, our knot is holding things in place for us just so it doesn't get all slippy slidey. I like to do a crisscross on my buttons, so I will go in the diagonal one, come back through the hole of the button in a different place on the strap of the ear saver. Tight. Now we're going to go into a different spot on the back that sort of aligns with the holes on the button. So we'll come back up through our third button hole and back down through the last one. And pull it out and pull everything tight. And then in this super secret, sophisticated technique, all I am going to do is take these two tails of yarn that I've left for myself with my weird button attaching technique and just tie them in 3 super tight knots. So there we have it. Our button is attached. It's not going anywhere. So now you just need to repeat the same thing on the other side of your ear saver. You can see my buttons are all attached. So now all we need to do to finish off our ear savers is to weave in these ends. In order to do that, we need to slip them down into the inside of our ear saver. We can't just clip them off tight to the knot here, because what might happen is as this gets worn and washed, if that knot starts to sort of loosen at all, if we clip the ends off tight, then it will for sure come undone, and we don't want that because then our button will fall off. So if we take these ends and we weave them in or hide them in our piece of crocheted fabric that we've made for our strap, then it will make sure that that knot never comes loose, and that everything stays where it should be. So each of these little V's here, that represents a stitch, right? So we want to go under each of these little B's. Right? We don't want to go too deep. We literally just want to go under these pieces of yarn right here, because if we go down in too far, then it'll show on the front side. So we want to just go under those two. We don't want to go all the way through. We're going to keep going under for like 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Right? And then we are going to pull everything. So some people would just trim what's left of this off, and if it was another project, I might too. But what we're going to do to make sure that it really stays in is we're going to actually back weave. So we want to skip this first stitch right here, otherwise we're just going to be pulling this back through where we just put it and it'll just pull right back out. So if we skip that first stitch and we go back in under the stitches that we just pulled our yarn through, I've inserted my needle into the stitches that I want this yarn to go through, just thread the yarn on, pull it through. So what we want to do is we just want to take this little piece that's left over, give it a little tug just so that it comes out a bit, snip it off with our ear saver, just a little tug. You can see that that piece of yarn is safely hidden away. So you're going to repeat the same process with all of the other tails that you have from your buttons and from tying off your strap. And here we have our rad finished ear saver, perfect for any frontline worker.